I'd like to welcome y'all back to another episode of Beyond the Fear podcast, the place where you come for motivation, inspiration, uplifting, and overall positive message. I'm your host, DJ. And earlier today, I read a post that said, success isn't built on success, success is built on failures. And that just kind of got me to thinking about how we look at failure. Well, especially me. Well, let me speak on me, how I look at failure and how I've been taught to look at failure. And I think that too many of us have been taught that failure is the end of the process, instead of looking at it as failure is a part of the process. I think that that's why so many of us are afraid to fail, because we look at it like once we fail, then it's over. Once we fail, then, there's nothing else after that. We have to do something else, or it's over. That journey, that thing that we wanted, that thing that we were striving for, there's nothing else left, once you fail. But in all honesty, failure is just a part of the process. Failure is just another step. Failure is a chance for you to take a step back, look at what happened, what worked, what didn't work, why it didn't work, what could have helped, what could you have changed. You modify your plan, you modify your approach, and then you try it again. But I think, especially for me growing up, failure was just that. It wasn't taught like that's a process. You learn from your failures. It's like once you fail, you're just labeled a failure, and that's the end of it. It's like, so when you're taught that way, that failure is the end game. Like once you fail, there's nothing else beyond that. There's nothing further for you once you fail. That's how you start to look at failure. Of course, it becomes a fear, because it's just like failure becomes this black hole, and once you fail, there's nothing else for you. You're a failure. And you become so afraid of being labeled a failure that you allow your fears to stop you from even trying to go after things, unless there's a guaranteed success. And it's so hard to find things in life that you can guarantee you're going to be good at, especially to the point to where you never fail, because you can be good at something and then you go up against, just let's just say, for example, you're good at football, you're good at wrestling, you're good at sports, and then you go against a player or a team that's just better than you, and then you finally lose. And now it's like, again, the way we've been taught, now you looking at yourself as a failure. Now you don't want to play sports anymore. Now you don't want to do that thing anymore. You don't want to try anymore. And I think that we have to start to reshape the way we look at failure and the way that we view failure. Instead of looking at it as an end goal, we look at it as a step. We look at it as a process, as a part of the process. It's time, when we fail, when things don't work the way we want them to, we have to reevaluate it. It's kind of like with science. If they do an experiment, they don't get the results that they want, they have to take a step back, look at what happened, look at the results that they did get, what are the results that they wanted, what happened, what variables changed, what were things that happened that were unexpected. There's so many things that they have to go through and so many boxes that they have to check, but they don't look at those failures as the end goal. They just look at it as process. They're part of the process. Another step. Okay, the temperature was too high. The temperature was too low. There wasn't enough moisture. There was too much light. It's all of these things, these different steps that they're taking. Every single experiment shows them something new in the process. So yes, they may have failed to get the goal that they wanted with this, but they've learned so much in that failure. They learned what worked. They learned what didn't work. They learned why it didn't work. They may have learned something better about the thing that they're experimenting on. They may have found um, a new whatever, in it, because they're experimenting, because they're trying, they're exposing this thing to stuff, to all this new stuff, and some of it is working. So some of it so some of it is successful, and other things aren't working, and those things are failure. But they don't look at failure as an end goal. They just look at it, failure, as a part of the process. And it's so important that we start doing the same thing. especially people like myself who grew up with this understanding of once you fail, now you're a failure and you'll always be a failure and you'll always be labeled a failure. And then then like I said before, that fear kicks in and now you don't even want to try and you want to give up and you want to quit because when times get hard, there's a good chance of failure. And when the chance of failure is high, then you get that fear of becoming a failure. You get that fear of having that failure label attached to you. So it's just so much easier to quit and give up on something or to never even try than it is to try and fail. And then you have to look at the people who love you, the people who care about you, give you that look of disappointment. And man, that it hurts, you know what I'm saying? Especially again, if you grow up kind of like how I did, where you may not have a bunch of people around you to support you. And then the few people that you do have, once they give you that look of disappointment, that look of, shame or whatever the case may be, it's kind of hard to shake that. It's kind of hard to get out of that and to bounce back from that. It's a lot to deal with. And it's a lot to process when you have somebody that you care about whose opinion of you matters, to what they think of you genuinely matters. And when you see that look of shame, they may not say anything, but you see that look and you get the energy and you get the vibe from them that you're not living up to expectation. Now it's like that fear of disappointment, that fear of it being a failure, it becomes so crippling. It becomes so paralyzing to the point to where you're questioning everything. It may be something that you know how to do, something you've done so many times, but the fact that there is this small chance, no matter how small it is, but there's a chance that you could fail. And now you have to have these looks of disapproval, these looks of shame from these people that you care about the most, whose opinion of you care about the most, mean the most to you. And you don't know how to express that. You don't know how to tell them that. So you just start to live with this fear, and this fear just starts to build up in you more and more and more. And like I say, it could be things that before you had that realization, things that you could answer with no problem because you were that confident in it, you knew it 100%. But now it's like once that doubt starts to creep in, it's so hard to get it out, especially if you don't get it out early and you don't understand where it's coming from. And then it's even worse when you don't even know that it's there. You know what I'm saying? Like for me, I didn't know it was there. My doubt was creeping in and I didn't know. All I know was like there was times when I remember a time when I could answer a question and didn't think twice about it. Right, wrong, whatever. I just answered, and then it got to a point to where it's like, okay, I don't want to be wrong, so I'm not going to answer at all. And then it got to the point where it's like, okay, I'm not even participating in class. I'm not participating in this because I don't want to fail. I don't want to even look like a failure. I don't want failure even associated with me. And it's like, it becomes so debilitating and it becomes so, again, paralyzing to the point to where you don't do anything because that's the way you can control you not looking like a failure. It's like if you never try, you don't have to worry about being a failure. You don't have to worry about feeling like a failure because there's nothing for you to fail in because you're not trying anything. And the things that you do try are things that you know for a fact 100% you can get right. And and it just puts you in this cage, it puts you in this box because it limits you to only the things that you know how to do. You're only going to apply for jobs that you know you can be successful in. You're only going to try to do things in school that you know you can be successful in. You're only going to play games that you know you can be successful in. You don't want to venture out, you don't want to try new things because you're scared of that failure. And as we're talking, I'm just realizing that, man, that's what happened to me in like my social life. I didn't want to go to new settings because I don't know how I handle those new settings. I don't know how I'm received in certain settings. So it's like, again, that failure thing. And I mean, mind you, like I say, I'm 36. And as I'm talking about it right now, I'm realizing like that's one of the reasons why I don't like to go new places. I don't like to try new things is because that fear of failure, that fear of not being enough, that fear of seeing disappointment in people's eyes, it's like, man, and like this should show you that once you fall into that hole and once that feeling and that thought gets a hold of you, it's so hard to let go of. And again, there are times when you don't even know that you're doing it. It's gotten such a hold of you that has become a part of your subconscious. So you subconsciously are doing things. You're subconsciously are sabotaging things because you don't want things to fail. You would much rather they fail on your terms. As for example, you would much rather. So for me, in my relationship, I would subconsciously do things to sabotage my relationship because I would much rather it fail on my terms than someone else's. I would much rather say, hey, this is too hard and I don't want to try and give up on it before giving it a real chance because I was afraid of failure. I was afraid of not being enough. And man, and it's real, man. It's real. It's really real, especially for people like myself who, again, I know I've talked about it before, so it's not like it's breaking news. I didn't grow up with my dad. So, that realization, that moment when it hit me like, hey, I don't know how to be a man. I don't know how to lead. I don't know how to protect and provide from an emotional and mental standpoint. I don't know how to create these safe spaces. I never knew that having a safe space for my partner and for myself, to a safe space emotionally and a safe space mentally. I never knew that those were even important things because I never saw it. I never knew that those were things. And so having that realization, hit me like a ton of bricks because, again, I've always been one of those people who hated my dad, felt like I didn't need him. And maybe I didn't need the version of him that he was when I was, young, but I did need somebody. I did need a mentor. I did need a positive father figure who I could look at and understand, okay, this is how men handle themselves. This is how we handle with our emotions. This is some things that we can do in a positive light to handle our aggression. We can go box. We can go work out. We can go pour this negative energy into something positive, you know what I'm saying? And I never learned those things. So I just learned a bunch of destructive and unproductive ways to deal with my anger and my frustration because I never taught and I never saw people handling it in a positive way. So I just adapted to what I saw, and I just started to recreate what I saw. And it was at that moment, I'm like, I think at the time I was like 32, 33, somewhere in there. It's like now I'm starting to realize because you hear all the time it's important. Fathers are important. Male role models are important. Father figures are important. Having those positive um, role models, somebody you can look at and see in your everyday life and say, hey, this is how I handle things. Those things are important. So you hear those things, but because in my mind I'm living a normal life, I'm good, I'm healthy mentally, emotionally, again, from my perspective. Nah, you don't need those things. That's just talk. And then it's like, then you go through life. You find somebody that you want to do life with and you go through life with them. And then it's like the things that you never had to test because I never had to test those things because I had been single for so long. Most of my adult life, I've been single. So there were real life adult situations that I just hadn't experienced before. So while I'm thinking in my head, yeah, I can handle this, I can handle that, I'm good mentally, emotionally, all of these things, I'm good. I wasn't because I had never been tested. I had never been through these things. So I didn't know how to handle those things. I didn't know that I wasn't even ready. I didn't have the equipment to handle it. I didn't have the bandwidth to handle it. I didn't have the capacity to handle all these things because I had never been put through it. I hear about my friends going through certain things and it's so easy to give advice, but it's something totally different when you're living it and you're having to go through it and it's your emotions that are tied into it. Like from the outside looking in, it's easy to give advice because you're not the one going through it emotionally and mentally. It's not tearing you apart emotionally and mentally, you know, because you have no emotional and mental investment in it, outside of, man, my friend's going through something. Let me give advice. But when it's you, it's so easy to get caught up in things and get lost in things. It's so easy for your emotions, again, when you don't have the capacity to handle your emotions and you're experiencing new emotions that you've never experienced before. And they're flooding you, you're getting flooded with these new emotions that you haven't felt like as an adult. And you don't know how to regulate them because you've never been taught and you've never had to go through it to understand I don't have what it takes to handle this. So it was a lot of things that I was going through for about 4 years in my relationship. And it was like, it was so easy to put all the blame on her. And, once I got out of that and I started to take accountability for my part, where I didn't play a good enough role as a boyfriend, as a partner, as the person who should have been able to create safe spaces, again, not just for her, but for myself. I failed myself and I failed her in so many places where I can pick up that accountability now, and I can understand the places where I fell short and, where I needed to grow. But I can also realize that a lot of that was like, just me again sabotaging. Some of it was me just sabotaging because I wanted to fail on my own terms. And, I didn't know how to fight for things. The only thing I really knew is when times get too hard and I feel like I can't handle it, or I'm convincing myself, telling myself I can't handle it. Okay, just quit, just give up. And there were plenty of times where I know I could have fought for it. And I know in my head, I had the thought, okay, I should do this. I should handle it this way. I should apologize. I should say something first. But my pride, my ego, and the fact that I don't want to do something and fail, that fear of failure, that fear of going out on this limb and apologizing or extending the olive branch, whatever, and then it doesn't work the way I want it to work or the way I feel it should work. That fear of failure, it stopped me from doing a lot of things that at the time I knew I should be doing. And man, it's just that fear of failure because of how we use it and how we've been taught to view it, how we've been taught to frame failure. It will pigeonhole you, it will put you in a box. And it did for me, man. It put me in a major box. And I'm still discovering things as we're talking about, to this day. I'm still figuring out how fear is still controlling, and how the fear of failure is still controlling my life, to the point, like I said, where I don't even want to do new things and go into new spaces because I'm worried about failing. So even something as simple as an interview, been going on what it is now, 5 months unemployed, and so even doing interviews, there's this feeling, I just went and did an interview a couple of weeks ago. And I pull up to the building, and the building is huge, this warehouse is huge. And it's just like, my first thought is, I'm not supposed to be here. I don't deserve to be here. Like, these are the thoughts that's running through my head. These are the first things that's running through my head. I don't deserve this position. And it's like, I'm sitting here literally mentally putting myself through all types of mental gymnastics over whether I deserve it or something, just because of the size of the building. And now the size of the building, it has me feeling some type of way, like, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna get this. I'm not gonna get this. And it's like, and I'm pretty sure they may have sensed that. And it's just that fear of failure, that fear of being in new spaces and trying new things. And you've gone so long with working in this type of environment or being in this type of situation, and now you're having to branch off, and you're having to expand yourself, and you're having to expand into new territory, into new places. And because that fear of failure still has a hold on you, it's hard for you to let that go. And then when you get to these new spaces and you get to these new places and you understand that these things are bigger than, the places that you've been before. That doesn't mean that that you don't deserve to be there. You absolutely deserve to be there. There's a reason why you got that call for that interview. There's a reason why they looked at your resume, looked at what you've done, and said, hey, you are a candidate. You deserve this interview. So if you're going through that, you deserve that interview. You deserve to be in those spaces. You deserve to be in those places. You deserve that job. Act like it, believe it, then act like it. But you have to believe that you deserve those things. There is a reason why, out of the thousands of candidates that they had to view, your name was picked to do that interview. Go in with the confidence of knowing that you deserve to be there. You deserve that job, and you will do great at that job. It may take you some time to learn, but what new job doesn't? What new thing doesn't? That's a part of it being new. There are going to be things about the job you already know from previous experiences, and there are going to be things about that job that are new to you. And you may stumble a little bit. You may fail at first, but understand that that failure is not the end of it. The failure is just a part of the process. You learn why you failed. You learn what didn't work. You learn what worked. You learn what helps you. You learn how to do it your way. You make that job. You make that your whatever that position, whatever it is, you make it yours. You do it the way that works for you, as long as it's within the guidelines of, the job, and you're not doing anything illegal, unlawful, or that's breaking any policies. You find a way to make that job, that position yours, so you make it to where it works for you in the best way for you. But man, you just keep pushing. And again, I have to tell myself that too, because I did get a little intimidated just by the size of the building. This is before I even talked to anybody, before I knew much about the position, just the size of the building. I come from a smaller town, so to go to have to travel like an hour to a bigger city, and it's just like, okay, this is different, but I just had to remind myself that I deserve to be there, and I have to keep reminding myself, and I have to keep doing my work, so that way the thoughts don't even come up, so it's still a work in progress for me. I'm still pushing, but I'm starting to realize that I have a lot of work to do just within my foundation and the way I view things, the way I look at things. So something again like failure, which I've put in a certain type of box and I viewed it a certain type of way most of my life, I have to now tear all of that down and realize that failure is just a part of the process. Failure is just a part of the journey. It's one thing to say, because I know that I've said it before. It's something totally different to believe in it. Like, when I talked about a few months ago, when my mom or when other people be like, you got to give it to God, you got to trust God. I understand that. I understand that I have to trust God. I need to trust God. I have to put it in His hands, but I don't know how. So getting to that point to where you can give it to God and let it go and not worry about it and not think about it. That's the process for me. Do I understand that that's what I need to do? Yes. Do I understand that failure is a part of the process? Yes, though it's understanding it. Like in my head, I understand that some things are bigger than me. Some things are battles that I can't fight. So I do need to give them to God. That I do understand that failure is a part of the process. Failure happens. We all fail things, but that failure is not the end of your journey. You can still pursue that thing even after you failed at it. There's still a chance for you to go and pursue what it is that you want. I think for me, it's just having to break down all of the beliefs, all of the thoughts, all of the way that I view certain things. I have to break all of that down. I have to tear all of that down, and I have to start from brand new foundation. I have to tear all of that because I've built a house of certain views, a house of beliefs over my 36 years of living. And now I'm having to tear all of that down because trying to live and trying to think a certain way that goes against the way I've thought or the way that I've lived for for most of my life. I can't just or let me not say I can't. It's very hard for me just to pivot and to go straight into that thinking. I have to tear some things down to get to for me personally. Now, other people may not be like that, but I have to tear some things down to get to that point. To understand that I have to get to a point to where I can just be like, God, I'm giving this to you, and then I don't stress about it because I trust wholeheartedly that He's got it. I'm having to build that. I'm having to find that. And again, part of me feels ashamed for even having to say that. But I also have to give myself grace and understanding. I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't grow up, with this understanding and with this belief that God got me. I watched my mom grind. I watched my aunts grind. I watched my cousins grind. I watched all of these, and again, mostly women, because I don't really have many uncles or male cousins that are around me. I got them in other states, but just growing up, I just watched these women go get it. And and again, I didn't grow up with God got me. God got me through this, and God found a way. God put me here. God had this plan. I needed to go through this to get to that. I needed to lose this to make room for that. I needed to suffer through this to understand that I have to go to God, because I was trying to I didn't grow up with that. I grew up with I gotta find a way. I gotta do this. I gotta do that. So that's what I learned. And so now at 36, to go from a life of me, I gotta find a way. I gotta dig myself out. I gotta to now, okay, God, handle that. It's going to take time for me. And again, to go from a life of, oh, you're a failure, oh, you failed, well, that's it, oh, you fail, loser, whatever, to nope, failure is just a part of the process. Failure, when you're trying to do something, when you're trying to be successful, you're going to fail. Failure happens. Failure is not the end for you. Failure is okay. You learn from those failures. You pick up the pieces. You figure out what worked. Again, conceptually, does it make sense? Yes. But again, I've been taught my whole life to view failure in one way. So now having to rewire my mind to view failure as just a part of the process, as part of the journey, as just another step that you have to take, as opposed to failure being the door being closed on you and there's no opening that door anymore. Those are two totally different viewpoints. And again, not saying I can't get there, because I absolutely will get there. It just takes time. And then there are places in my life where I didn't know that viewpoint was affecting my life. And as things happen, and as I talk about it on here or just with friends and stuff, and I get more realization, it just opens the door like, okay, I still have more work to do. I still have places where it's so dark, I don't know what's going on. I need to poke more holes and see what's going on. So when it comes to that fear of failure thing, it's just another place where I have to continue to poke holes and continue to figure out what's going on. Why do I feel this way? Why am I so okay with um destroying my future? Why do I love to get in my own way? Why am I so comfortable getting in my own way? Why is it so easy for me to get in my own way? And what I'm realizing is that I just have such a strong fear of failure that I would much rather not make it, or I would much rather sabotage something than to hear the yes, than to get it and then fail. You know what I'm saying? I would much rather not get something than to get it, for somebody to give it to me and then I fumble it. You know what I'm saying? I hope that I'm making sense. I know in my head I'm making sense, but I may not be articulating it to the best of my ability. But yeah, man, like that's like a huge thing for me that I'm starting to realize, is that, when I'm starting something new journey, I think that's why it's so easy for me to get in my own way, easy for me to sabotage something, is because I would much rather fail on my terms than to try my hardest at something, get it, try my hardest to get it, and then still fail, but because I'm still looking at failure as that means the door is now shut and it's been locked from the other side. So there's no way for me to unlock the door. So I have no more access to it. Instead of realizing that failure is just another step, failure just means you have to approach it from a different way. You have to view it as, you still have access. You just may not have access through this door, but there are still other doors to get to where you want to get to. And that's the process that I'm having to go through, is just to rewire my mind into understanding that failure is just a part of the process and it's not the end goal. And, that's just my message for today for anybody listening, is that failure isn't the end. You failing at something doesn't mean that that's the end of your goal. That's the end of your dreams. That's the end of your journey. It just means that you got to find a different route now, or you just got to take a different approach to the thing that you want, because whatever it is that you did this time didn't work doesn't mean that it won't work next time or even the time after that. It just means that every single time that it doesn't work, figure out what exactly didn't work, what did work, and then start to build on the things that did work and start to find a substitution for the things that didn't work, find another way for the things that didn't work, find something else to put into your plan for the things that didn't work. But that's it for today's episode. I want to thank everybody for listening on whatever platforms y'all are listening on, to listening to the podcast on. And I want to thank everybody on YouTube for continuing to watch the show, watch the podcast. Thank y'all so much on both sides, for the listeners and the viewers. Please continue to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And y'all already know, until the next time we meet, y'all stay blessed.